Tov. Today's daf yomi is Bava Kamma daf Kuf Yud, Bava Kamma 110. And we're going to start on the bottom of Kuf Tes Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom. Today's daf yomi is dedicated for Yeshua, for Am Yisrael, Shmira for the Chayalim, Hatzalah for the Shvuyim. So the Gemara continues by raising a brisa. Tana Rabbana Minala Kohen Shabo Makriv Karbanos of the whole Esav whole Shashayirta. How do we know that even though there are 24 watches and the Kohanim families are divided into 24 separate groups called a Mishmar, and these Mishmaros, that's when each Kohen had to serve in the temple, and that's when the Karbanos that were brought then were divided up amongst those Kohanim. Nevertheless, if a Kohen wanted to bring a korban whenever he wanted, he had the authority to bring his own korban. How do we know that? Because it says in the pasuk in Devarim, "Uva b'chol avat nafsho el makom asher yivchar Hashem v'shareis b'shem Hashem olkav." So it says that he could come whenever he wants and serve. Uminayin shavodasa v'ora shalo. Rashi says that the word avodasa, service, means reward for a service. That means, Rashi says, to eat the meat. Now, how do we know that the Kohen who brings his korban can eat from the meat and he gets the skin? Amalomar v'ish es kodashav will you. Each man, his holy offerings, he gets to have them. The Gemara assumes that it can't mean something, a simple case. And if the Kohen brings it, he gets to eat it, because that's already obvious, and the Gemara wouldn't need to have told us that. And so therefore, because we already know he's allowed to bring it, and so since he can bring it, it says for sure he could get it. So therefore, the Gemara says this must be referring to an unusual case. So what's the case it's referring to? Okay, it said Imaya Baal Mun. Let's say he had a blemish. So therefore, generally speaking, the Kohen who has a blemish can eat from the korban, but he can't bring it. So if he has a blemish, then knows no Kohen Shaba'osa Mishmar. Rashi says if he has a blemish, he can't make a shliach to bring it from whoever he wants because he can't bring it. So what does he do instead? He just gives it to the people of the Mishmar and they bring it. But since he's able to eat it, so therefore he gets the skin, the meat and the skin. That's how the first explanation of Rashi. Okay, so my Ba'amum knows no Kohen Shaba'osa Mishmar. He just gives it over to the Mishmar to serve. But he gets to eat from it because it says "Ish is kodashav lo yiyeh." That's what the pasuk lo yiyeh. That's what the pasuk is teaching us. On the top of Kuf Yud Amud Aleph, if he was sick or if he was elderly, and so therefore if he's sick, he can serve in the temple. Tosfos points out that Kohanim don't have an age where they're disqualified. Leviim do have an age where the Torah disqualifies them. But the Kohen can serve until he shakes too much. So, if he's sick or he's elderly or sick, then he can appoint a shliach. He can give it to whichever Kohen he wants because he's able to do the service. But since he can't eat it because he's sick, then the meat and the skin he can't appoint a shliach for, so it just goes to the people of the Mishmar. Gemara says, well, wait 1 second. What kind of sick or elderly is this? If he's able to do the service, then if he's able to do the service, then the skin and the meat should also be his. Come on in, my dear friend Hobbs. We're on the top of 110a. But if, what a big shkoyach to you, Hobbs. 27 degrees outside, you're walking in the cold, shkoyach. But if he can't do a service, if he's not strong enough to do the service, then shliach, then how can he appoint an agent to do the service on his behalf? The Gemara says, Amar Papa sheyachol asos al yedei atchak. No, he could do the service, but only under duress. But if you do the service with difficulty, that's called a service. Therefore, mashvi shliach, and therefore you can appoint an agent to do it. But achila, but consumption, is a very important point. If you're only eating because you're forced to, and you're not eating any pleasure, that's called achila gasahi. That's called overeating or obnoxious eating or a vulgar eating. If you're eating and it's not, because eating has to be pleasurable. So if you're eating and it's not pleasurable, it's achila gasa, that's not considered anything. And so therefore, for this reason, therefore the skin and the meat, they go to the people of the mishmar, because since he's unable to eat it, then he can't appoint a shliach for it because it's achila gasa. So now we're up to the next scenario. Says Rav Sheshes, we're around 10 lines from the top of 110a. Amar Rav Sheshes, Imaya Kohen Tameh, the carbon sibor, if the Kohen was Tameh. So if a Kohen is Tameh, generally speaking, he's ritually impure, he can't bring a carbon. But there's an exception. That's a carbon sibor. A communal offering is what we say is hutra b'tumah. That a communal offering, if there's nobody else who could bring it, you could bring it even in a state of ritual impurity. So if the Kohen be tamei by a communal offering, you could give it to whoever you want. No, don't call Misha Yirtza, because since he's able to do it, so therefore he can appoint anybody who he wants as his agent. And the meat and the skin, since he can't eat it, go to the people of the watch, all the Kohanim of that watch. Where it says, well, I don't understand what the scenario is. What's the scenario? If there are people who are tahor there, if there are other Kohanim, and how that he could appoint, then how is the tummy person able to do it? How could he have brought it? The idea that the tumah is hutra b'tzibur, that you could do it as a communal offering if you're tummy, that's only if there's nobody who's tahor. Be the leka tahorim, and if there's nobody there who's tahor, then avodas v'oro l'manche mishmar, then why are you giving the meat and the skin to the people in the mishmar? They're tummy, they can't eat it. So who is he giving it to? So says Rava, Amar Rava, this is what Rav Sheshes is saying. That the Kohen can give it to the people, the Kohanim of that watch, who have a blemish. So they can't serve, but they could eat. So then the Gemara says, another scenario. Amar Rav Ashi, Imaya Kohen Gadol Onin, Nos no Kol Kohen Sheyirtza, Avodasa V'oro Anshi Mishma. So a Kohen Gadol, the high priest, every other Kohen, when they're in Onin, Rahman al-Atzlan, on the day one of their close relatives has died, they're not allowed to serve, but the Kohen Gadol has to serve. He's not allowed to go to their funeral. So if the Kohen Gadol is in Onin, that means he can serve. Then he comes to do his service. He can give it to whichever Kohen he wants that day. But since he can't eat it in Aninos. Why? Because presumably he's not allowed to serve. He's allowed to serve, but he's not allowed to eat. So therefore, he gives the meat and the skin to the Anshe Mishmar. So Gemara says, well, my kamashma, what's this chiddush here? What's Rav Ashi's chiddush? He says, Tanina, Kohen Gadol makriv onen vein ochel. We already learned the brisa. The Kohen Gadol brings it as an onen, but he doesn't eat the meat, even because he's an onen. Vein ochel lechol erev. And that night, when he's no longer an onen, because Rashi says that the aninos at night is rabbinic, and the aninos, biblical aninos, is only on the day of the death. And so therefore, that night, you might think, okay, he can eat the sacrifices that were brought that day when he was in a state of aninos. And we say he can't. So if that's the case, what's Rav Ashi's chiddush? We already know that the Kohen Gadol can bring, and he can't eat. So what's Rav Ashi even teaching us? Where it says, no, you might have thought, the Kohen Gadol with Kerubei. Now, when does the Torah have compassion on the Kohen Gadol to tell him that he's still serving in the temple, even though he's in Onen? That's only to bring it But I might have thought he can't appoint an agent to serve in the temple. That's not sufficient. He has a dispensation, but he can't appoint anybody else. Kamash will know he himself can do it, and he can appoint others. So that's the chiddush. So if we looked into that, there's lumdus of why we would have thought that Kohen Gadol is able to bring it, but not appoint an agent. So what's the exact concept that's being taught there? I go now up to the next Mishnah. Agoizel es hager. Somebody, Rahman al steals from the convert, and here we're talking about a convert who died without any relatives. But before he died without any relatives, the person who stole from him, nishbalo, he took an oath to him, umeis, and then the convert dies. So we know that if you take an oath falsely, and then you admit it, you have to pay back to the money to the person you lied to, plus 1/5, plus bring a carbon asham. But in this case, who does he pay it back? The convert died, and the convert has no relatives. So who does he pay it back? So it's a special verse from the Torah that he pays back the principal plus 1/5 to the Kohanim. The asham on mizbeach, and then he brings the carbon asham on the altar, as it says, "V'meila ishko ela shiva asham elav ha'asham hamushav Hashem lakohen." Novad el kapurim asher yichaper bo olav. So it says specifically if the Kohen has, if the convert, the person you stole from has no relatives, then you give it to the Kohen and you bring the carbon. So, but let's say what's the scenario? Let's say he's bringing up the money, vesa asham and the carbon asham, umeis, and then so the person who lied, the liar and the thief, is bringing up the money to give to the Kohen, and then the person dies on the way. So akasav yinasam abanav va'asham yirei yistav v'mochar v'pulu damav l'nedava. So then, under those circumstances, well, the money he gives to his children. Why to the children of the robber? Because he, technically speaking, the robber had acquired it when the convert died, but he has to do the atonement of returning it. But since he's dead, he doesn't have atonement anymore, so then the sons could just keep it. Even though in other cases we see that sometimes the son can do an act of atonement on behalf of the father, this Gemara doesn't go down that road. And then you take the money, but it becomes an asham, a carbon asham. You take the animal, an asham whose owner died. So there you let it graze until it gets a blemish. Then you sell it and you take the money and give the money for a carbon nedava, a voluntary offering on the altar. Let's say this person, the robber, gave the money to the Kohanim of that watch to divide up, umeis, and then he died before he could bring the carbon. Since he didn't get the full atonement, so then the heirs can't go back and say, well, my father gave the money to get a full atonement. He didn't get the atonement. I want to take back my money. No, you can't do that. It says the so the one who gave the Kohen, who gives the money to the Kohen has the money. Now, Nasan call Akasaf Yehoyarav. The first watch was Yehoyarav. The watch of the 24 watches was the family of Yehoyarav. So he gave the money to them for Asham Yadaya, and then he gave the carbon Asham to bring for the next watch that they get the meat and the skin, and they bring the offering Yahtzeh. That's okay because you have to give the money before you bring the carbon. But Asham Yehoyarav, once he does it the reverse, he brings the Asham to Yehoyarav, the Kasaf Yadaya, and the money to Yadaya. Imkiyem Asham. If at that point, since he was supposed to give the money before the Asham, if the Asham is still alive that he gave to Yehoyarav, Yakrivu b'nei Yedaya, then the people from b'nei Yedaya should bring it. But if the Asham was already offered, Yachzir v'yavi Asham. He has to go back and bring another Asham. You have to bring the money before the Asham. But if you bring the carbon before the money, well, yatsa. You have to fix the deed before you bring the carbon. You have to return the money before you bring the carbon. Let's say you gave the principal, but not the extra 1/5 penalty. Well, the chomesh does not prevent you from bringing the carbon. You can bring the carbon as long as you pay the principal, even though you haven't paid the 5th. So the Gemara cites a brayso asham zakar when it says in the pasuk Hashiva Hasham Elav Hasham Hamushav Hashem. When it says Hasham in the pasuk, that refers to the principal. Hamushav, that refers to Zechomesh. That refers to the extra fifth. Away no way. Maybe it's the opposite. Asham Za'ayah. Maybe the Asham is the ram. Kamina. Why do we care which is the principal and which is the ram and which is the fifth? Gemara says, "Lafukimi de Rava," to exclude the position of Rava. Dama Rava, Gezel Ger Shechzira B'Layla Yatza. Rava says that if you stole from the convert and you give it to the Kohen at night, you haven't fulfilled your obligation. That makes sense if you say Asham, the carbon is the Karen. So therefore, just like a carbon can't be brought at night, so to the Karen can't be returned at night. If you return after money, you have not fulfilled your obligation. What's the reason? My time Asham Kari Rachman, and the Torah calls an Asham. You can't do half a carbon. Kishu Omer Melvad Ayo Akipurim Ave Omer Asham Zu Karen. It says, aside from the ram of the atonement, we see from here that the Asham is the principal. Another brayso, Asham said Karen, and Mushav Zechomesh. The Asham is the Karen, and the Mushav is the fifth. Maybe it's the opposite. Asham Zechomesh. Another reason, what are we trying to teach us? Lafukim must nisin. Exclude the position of our Mishnah that Tanan Nasan was a Karen, Nasan was a Chomesh. If he gave him the principal, but not the Chomesh, Eina Chomesh Ma'akev. If he gives him the principal, but not the 1/5, the 1/5 is not essential. It's not essential to stop the carbon. Only the money is necessary to stop the carbon, not the extra money, not the 1/5. Gemara says, Adarabba Chomesh Ma'akev. No, just the opposite. Chomesh is essential. When it says he should return the Ashamo Barosho, V'chamishiso, so that teaches us the Asham is the Karen, because Ashamo Barosho. Okay. Tanya Idach, another brayso, Asham is a Karen, and Mushav is a Chomesh. But Gezla Gara Kasabadavar. So it says Asham, that refers to the principal, and the Mushav is the Chomesh. Well, that refers to somebody who steals from the convert. Or, Mushav is a Kefil. Maybe Mushav is double, but Gneva Sager Kasabadavar. And that's maybe it's referring to somebody who is Gezla Ger, which is a robber from a convert, where you don't pay double, but Kefil, which is Geneva Sager, where you were a thief and you pay double. So the Gemara says, it means no, we're talking about the essential money, the principal, not the penalty. So now the Gemara analyzes these series of prices. That if you stole from a convert and you returned it at night, you did not fulfill your obligation. If you return half of it, you have not fulfilled your obligation. My time, Asham Kari Rachmana. Torah calls it an Asham. So now we have a Chiddush from Rava. Let's say you steal from the convert. You steal $100. Let's say you steal $100. Let's say you steal $1. That's 100 pennies. And now you come to return it to the watch, but there's only 50 Kohanim in the Mishmar. So they wouldn't each be getting a penny. So Gezel Ger, if you stole from the convert, Shembo Shava Pruta, Kohen, and now you want to give it to the watch, but each Kohen wouldn't get a Pruta, approximately a penny. Well, you have to say Dechovaso, then you haven't fulfilled your obligation of returning it. You have to return to every coin. So Rashi says, under those circumstances, you need to add on a penny for each coin there, a pruta for each coin, in order to fulfill the mitzvah. So Rashi says, Mosef Mishalo owed Lashlim. He has to add more. By Rava. So now Rava asks the next question. Aim Bola Mishmeres Yehoyarav. Let's say there's not enough people in the watch of Yehoyarav. First watch, there's not enough Kohanim. There's only 50. V'yesh Bola Mishmeres Yedaya. But there is, let's say, 100 in the watch of Yedaya. So you can return it in that watch. Ma, what will we say? Heichidami. So would we say that? What's the question here? Gemara says, Heichidami. If you want to say, can I give it to Yedaya when it's in their watch? Well, there's no question there. They have the people. No, it's the week of Yehoyarav, but you want to give it to, but he gave it to Yedaya. My, would we say, would we say that since it's not Yedaya's watch, they're nothing, and therefore you can't give it to them? Or maybe since Yehoyarav doesn't have the people, then they're not fit for it, and so therefore he could go to Yedaya. Gemara says Teku. Teku means you leave the question unresolved. Bali Rava, next question. Keneged Gezel Ger. There's general speaking, a law that you're not allowed, Kohanim are not allowed to trade parts of the meat. Like some people trade lunch in school. You're not allowed to trade karbanos. You can't say, oh, I get your Hashem today, you give me your Hashem tomorrow. You can't do that. Kohanim are not allowed to do it. What about the Gezel Ger? Can you say, okay, you take this Gezel Ger, you take this guy's bringing this, I'll get the next one. You're not allowed to do that. Do we say you're not allowed to do that? Or do we say you can? Me, I'm reading in Asham Karya Rahman. Do we say it's called an Asham? Ma Asham and Cholkan, Asham Keneged Asham. Just like a Kohen can trade the parts of the Asham. Av Gezel and Cholkan Gezel Ger. By the way, this is another halacha that applies to things that are holy. Like some people say, how do you sell a Sefer Torah? You had to let's say you had to do an auction for Sefer Torah. Let's say you say, all right, everybody gives in $1 or $1,000. We get 1,000 people in the community to put in. Then you're going to get a lot of money, and whoever wins it gets the Torah. What is that, Hobbs? What's 1,000 times 1,000? What are we talking about? How much money? $1 million. You could raise $1 million by auctioning off the Torah. No, it's disrespectful to the Torah. So the question is, are you allowed to divide up the Gezel Ger, the money that was stolen? Do we say it's like an Asham? Just like an Asham, you can't divide up. So to the Gezel Ger. And Cholkin Gezel Ger, Keneged Gezel Ger. Oh, Dama, or maybe we say Gezel Ger Mimonahu. Or do we say that maybe Gezel Ger is considered money? So, or do we say Gezel Ger is considered money? And so therefore, since it's considered money, you're allowed to divide it up. So Hadar Pashe, Asham Kari Rahman. He says, no, it's called an Asham. You can't divide it up like that. Rav Acha the Rav Masnila Behedra. He taught this as an explicit law. I'm a Rav Kohanim and Cholkin Gezel Ger, Keneged Gezel Ger. They're not allowed to divide it. They're not allowed to trade the parts that they were stolen. My time, Asham Kari Rahman. The Torah calls it an Asham. By Rava, Kohanim begezel Ger, Yarshin Avu, or Mekabel Matanos Avu. Okay, when the Kohanim get this money that's being returned because the guy stole from the convert, are they considered heirs or are they considered like they're receiving a gift? The Gemara says, well, why do we care? Well, my nafkamina. No, you have to care. You could go and shigazal chametz. Let's say the guy stole chametz from the convert, shavar of Pesach, and now it was chametz that was owned on Pesach. So Iamris, Yorshin Avu, if you want to say they're heirs, I know DRC, Morris, he says, well, this is what I inherited. Here it is. I can just give to chametz to the Kohen and say, enjoy, even though you can't have any benefit from it, I'm done. If you want to say no, they're like people get gifts. You have to give him a gift. You're not giving him anything, you're just giving him dirt because it's no benefit. So what's that? Before the Gemara answers it, Rav Ziri asked the question like this. If you want to say they're getting gifts, that's not a question. Because this is a gift. You got this chametz and you give it to him as a gift. No, what's the question? You can go Janafu Eser Be'emos Begezel Ger. Guy stole 10 animals, 10 baby animals from the convert. And now he wants to return them to the Kohen. And so the question is, is the Kohen required to separate what's called Meiser Behema? Every 10th animal has to be brought as a korban. Do we say Yorshinavu, that they're heirs, the Amar Kano Betfisas Abayas Chayavin, because we learned that if you inherit something, you have to do the mitzvah of Meiser Behema. Or do we say, no, that they're like people are getting gifts, and it's a special dispensation from the rule of the Meiser Behema. If you got it as a gift, you don't have to give Meiser Behema. So what's that lacha? So now the Gemara says a brayso that's very important, and we could really spend a lot of time on it, but we'll go through it quickly. Tashma Esrim Arbam Tanos Kahuna Nisnu Aaron Ubanav. There are 24 different matnos kahuna, gifts of the Kohen that were given to Aaron and his children. That's this week's parsha. This week's parsha talks about Parshat Tetzaveh, talks about how Aaron and his sons are going to be inaugurated to be the Kohanim Chukas Olam, as a law forever. And as part of that law, we're going to learn later on in the Torah that they're given the matnos kahuna. So what are they? We learn them all through a klal prat to klal, through a derivation of a general followed by a specific followed generation. Ubris melach kol mekaymin. Kilu kayim klal pratu klal. And it's a covenant of salt forever that whoever fulfills them, it's as though you fulfilled the whole Torah. Ubris melach kol over aleim. Whoever violates them, kilu over klal pratu klal. Ubris melach. And it's and whoever violates them, it's as though you violate the whole Torah and the covenant of salt. The Eloin, these are them. Esther b'mikdash, 10 are in the temple. Dala b'Yerushalayim, 4 in Jerusalem. The Esther b'Gvulim, and 10 outside the temple in the land of Israel. What are the 10 in the temple? Esther b'mikdash, chatos behema. This is the korban chatos of an animal. The Kohen gets the meat. Chatos of the korban chatos of the chatas of a bird. So hold on one second. Chatas ha'of. That if a person is zava or zava, he brings these offerings. And he has the right to bring this bird offering. Va'asham, he gets the meat of the korban asham. Va'adai va'asham tawai, and asham tawai is you're not sure if you did the sin. V'zivchei shalmei. There are 5 types of asham va'adois. 5 types of them are asham gezelos, asham meilos, asham shivcha, asham nazir, asham mitzara. And an asham tawai is a person is not sure if he violated this prohibition. That's called a prohibition that has kares associated with it. And then there is the zivchei shalmei tzibor, the karbanos of the shlamim of the communal offerings, the lug shemen shal mitzora, and the oil of the mitzora, mosar omer, the leftover of the barley offering, u'shtei alechem, the 2 loaves of bread that are brought on Shavuos, v'lechem aponim, and this is the bread that is given out to the kohanim of the watch on Shabbos, u'shiyori hamenachos, and the leftover of the korban mincha after the kometz is brought on the mizbeach, va'arba b'Yerushalayim, and the 4 that can be eaten in Jerusalem are the Bechorah, the firstborn animal, the Bikurim, the first fruits, Muram Minatoda, the parts that are separated from the korban toda, meaning to say the breast and the thigh, and the 4 chalos, the 4 loaves of bread that come with it, the El Nazir, and the parts that are separated from the korban of the Nazir. That this is the korban that the Nazir brings at the end of his Naziris, the Oros Kadashim, and the skin of the Kachim animals, i.e., the Ola, the Chatos that are Kachim. The Asara, Big Vulin. And then there are 10 that are brought outside the land of Israel. What are these 10? This is the Truma that you have to give from the produce, you have to take an offering to the Kohen. Dagan Tirish V'Yitzer, Trumas Meiser, that after you give to the Levi, Meiser, he has to separate Truma. Reishes Agaz, this is the wall, the first shearing, give to the Kohen. V'Matanos, this should still apply today, that you have to give to the Kohen from the forearm, the jaw, and the parts of the stomach, called the Keva. So this applies to every animal. So theoretically, the tongue is supposed to go to the Kohen. So it's a question, how come you could eat tongue today? It's supposed to go to the Kohen. Okay, the Kohen's allowed to share it with you, but he's supposed to have given it to you. You're supposed to have given it to the Kohen. And Pidyon Aben, the money for the redeeming the firstborn, Pidyon Petach Hamor, the firstborn donkey, Ustei Achuza, and the inherited field that was consecrated to the temple and never redeemed. And then the treasure is sold to somebody else. In the Jubilee year, it's divided amongst the Kohanim. Ustei Charamim, somebody who consecrates his field using expression of Cherem. The Gezel Ager, and somebody who steals from the convert. So we see from here that the Gezel Ager is called one of the gifts of the Kahuna, and it's not a Yorsh. It's not an heir. Kakari Mias Matana, so it's called a gift. Shmamina Mekabel Matana Savu. We see from here that it's called a gift. Shmamina. So we see from here that the Gezel Ager, if you steal from the convert, give it to the Kohen, it's called one of the gifts of the Kahuna. So I just want one of the things that